Welcome to the F3 podcast, where we discuss all things that pertain to faith, family, and finances. And remember, no subject is off limits. We are your hosts today. I am the lowly but humble. I'm just a nobody trying to tell everybody about somebody who can change anybody. All right. Dr. Lionel M. Blair Sr., and I'm sitting next to the glorious, the wonderful, the immaculate, the perfect wife. Glory to God. Saint Jasmine the First, Dr. Jasmine Blair. We got a good one for you today, as always.
Welcome, everybody, to the F3 podcast. Listen, if it's your first time with us, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time we release a new episode. Be sure to take us with you on the go. You can find us where your favorite podcast episodes are streamed. And as always, click the link to find out more about how you can become an avid supporter of the F3 podcast and drop us a voicemail if you've got
Yeah.
questions you want us to answer, show topics you want us to go over. Because remember, we'll talk about what your pastor won't. So we're going to continue today's topic on what makes a ministry cultish. Um, Part one was really great. So if you did not see part one, make sure you go back,
Yes.
or if you didn't listen to part one, go back and watch/listen to it. Get an understanding of the foundation. We're going to continue today's conversation
Yeah.
about why cults are so successful.
Yeah.
I think that people forget that one of the things that makes cults successful is that there are some positive principles to it,
That's true.
right? There are some good parts, there are some positive principles, there are some things that work that what led people or drew people to it in the beginning. But it's that little piece of twisted deception, you see what I'm saying, that turns it into something wicked that it's not supposed to be. So I think that this for me is on the outside looking in and grabbing for what people say. I've watched several documentaries that have been done on cults and docu-series because it was something that I wanted to understand for myself. Like, okay, why do these people keep saying everybody they don't like is in a cult or a cult leader?
Right.
And I find that a lot of people, as we talked about in the previous episode, they're offended, they're upset, they didn't get their way or whatever. But we forget that somebody having a large following, for example, well, they went here, all of a sudden they got all these thousands and thousands of people follow them. They shut this down because they came to town. If it's that doesn't make a person a cult.
Right.
And so we have to understand the difference between a cult. You have to remember they said the same thing about Jesus. Let that sink in. They said the same thing about Jesus.
Right.
So having a large following is not what makes a ministry cult. It's just certain things. And I watched a recent documentary several months ago, a more recent documentary. I won't say the name, but it was about a particular mega church, and they said how this ministry was cultish, and there were some things that was found out. From my understanding, I don't know the fullness, but from what they shared in the documentary, um, there was one particular leader in that ministry that had some major issues, and there was another one. So they went over a few people in the documentary, but there were two main people who had some issues. One of them played a very prominent role. Another one was somebody that was, hired and kind of mentored by the person that played a prominent role.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously those things are not okay. Those things are not acceptable. But when you take out the actions of this handful of people, because you had two individuals and they discussed maybe two or three. So let's say five people. And you look at the extent of this ministry over a 5, 10, 15, 20-year period. The actions of a few people doesn't make the entire vision, mission, and execution a cult.
Right.
That's what bothers me about people, because they're saying how ridiculous it is. And I'm listening to the vision about, preaching the gospel to the ends of the earth. Okay, what church don't say that?
Right.
What church don't? Any church worth its salt that understands the Great Commission, right? We want the gospel spread, even though the gospel been preached to the ends of the earth. We want the gospel spread to every nation. As many eyes to see, as many ears to hear, as many spirits to awaken and accept Christ as possible. That doesn't make somebody a cult because they want to spread the gospel.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Right.
Oh, well, they wanted the gospel everywhere. They wanted to make an impact around the world. We're on the internet now. Some of y'all watching from other countries.
Yeah.
That does not, in today's society, that's not strange to be here in the United States like we are and maybe reaching somebody all the way in the North Pole somewhere. That's not strange when we have access to the internet. But they had visions about, a ministry school and visions about worship and things like that. There's a lot of ministries that have these things. And well, they wanted to, as they said in the documentary, infiltrate all areas of society. Okay, how many people preach the Seven Mountain Mandate? And yes, I know some of y'all don't agree with it. God bless you. I'm not talking about y'all, but how many people preach the Seven Mountain Mandate that we should have somebody who represents the church, somebody to show and express the love of God in every area of society. We need people showing the love of Christ in the school system, people showing the love of Christ in politics, definitely, people showing the love of Christ in media, people showing the love of Christ in music. We need people showing the love of Christ in science labs. We need somebody everywhere that can shine their light and represent the love of Jesus Christ. There's nothing cultish about any of that. But see, they took the actions of a few that were unjust and wicked, and the whole thing is a cult. Don't trust it. That doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. So I want to talk about this today because I think it's important that we really understand what makes something a cult and the terms that people mean it.
Right.
Because see, the truth is, there's a difference between a cult and occult, as you say many times.
Yeah.
A cult in its simplest definition is a strong, devout following. I'm paraphrasing from Google. It's a strong, devout following that's usually religious in nature, but it could be for other things as well.
Right.
So the thing that you've got to ask yourself, are the beliefs causing any actual harm to anybody? Are they presenting a danger? One of the things that I saw on the documentary I was watching on cults, this particular ministry in another state somewhere, they had, certain beliefs about guns and, guns rights. And there's nothing wrong with supporting guns rights. But it was to the point where I would say, because I don't remember exactly what they said in the documentary, but the majority of the guns that were owned in that county were owned by members of the church. It wasn't like spread out throughout the county. Like the church had like 500 people. 70% of the guns in the whole county was owned within that church.
Wow.
So obviously that posed a different kind of threat. It wasn't just their belief. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Posed a different kind of threat when the amount of guns you would expect to see spread out about 50,000 people or so is contained within 500 people. That can be an issue.
Yeah.
So we label things because we don't understand or because we don't agree with things. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't. We've got to stop labeling stuff. So what makes a cult a cult? That's one of the questions that we have to really answer, because until then, we won't really know the difference. And during this episode, I think it's important that we point out some of those thin line things. So we talked about one of them last episode is about, telling somebody, if they leave this church, don't talk to them. There's a thin line between marking every single person that leaves as a traitor, as an outsider, as being judged, or God's going to, unalive them, God's going to get them or whatever, versus this person specifically caused division and dissension and strife and spread lies and gossip. They split the church. They did this, that, and the third. You're advised to steer clear of them until we can reconcile and make this right. Those are two very different things that look very similar. But if you're offended, you won't see the biblical nature in the second part versus the cultist nature in the first part. Any pastor that's saying every person that leaves their ministry is going to be unalived or judged by God or is a traitor to the body of Christ or the kingdom of God, that is cultish.
Very, very.
And if we're going to be honest, there are more pastors that honor honorable transitions publicly, because a lot of people are streaming services now. There
Yeah.
are more pastors that honor honorable transitions than there are saying don't talk to this person because they cause strife and dissension and division. Honestly, you have more pastors keeping silent about this stuff than they are actually marking them where they biblically have a right to.
Right.
What you think about that?
Well, I got experiences with leaving the ministry and being cursed. Uh, I remember one time I had two whole churches praying against me, but everybody who's some people are just called to pass through. Everybody's not called to stay.
Mm-hmm.
But see, some people have a superiority complex about their ministry, and just because, let's say, you do have a unique ministry or whatever, just because you have a uniqueness of your ministry or a special ministry, because there are special ministries out there. Just because you have a special or unique ministry does not mean that you're the only one that's special or unique.
Well,
Okay. And you don't have a right to say that if you leave here, it's over for you.
that's right.
I heard a leader say that one time. You leave here, there's nothing else for you. It's over for you.
Terrible.
There is nothing else outside of this.
So now the difference is this person or anybody, nobody was allowed to make an honorable transition anywhere.
No.
Versus people being able to make an honorable transition, but okay, somebody might be labeled because they're causing division and strife and dissension. Nobody can make an honorable transition.
Whether a person's right or wrong, they should have the choice and be allowed to leave. Without all that, without spewing all that garbage. Even if you disagree, a lot of pastors disagree with your decision, but they have to honor it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are people who disagree with your decision to leave their church, and guess what? I mean, they don't bash you. They don't bash you or trash your name or whatever the case may be. So, when you see leaders always bashing and trashing people who leave, or they say there's nothing else for them outside of this, or they're going to go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
I sat in a couple ministries like that. I got up out of there too. Anybody who leaves your ministry is going to hell. They were straight when they was in your ministry. Now they're a warlock when they leave. Stuff like that, or they're a traitor. What is this?
It's crazy.
What is this, man? And the sad part about it is, Apostle Jasmine,
Mm-hmm.
people go to these ministries looking for God.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times these ministries do have a lot of times they do have something unique about them.
Yeah.
Whether it's the teaching, the revelation, the presentation, or whatever. Some of them even moving miracles.
That's the next point. That's the point I was actually going to make. A lot of cults or cultish ministries, you have this charismatic person, this person that moves in miracles, that has a good message.
Supernatural.
They're bringing something different to challenge the status quo. That by itself does not make somebody or a ministry a cult or cultish. What you have to look at, what is the motive or what is the intent behind this, and follow the background of the person.
Yeah.
See, when you follow the background of the person, it's like I was saying before, there's a weight left behind. What is this person's background? Not, oh, they studied here. I got this degree. I got this degree. And some people don't realize your track record will speak volumes for you.
Man, oh man.
Your track record. I mean, we've had people, God sent me on assignment to help you in ministry. I've done this, I've done this, I've done that. Okay, but you've been to 5 churches in the last 4 years, and everywhere you go, you trying to either start a program in somebody's church or revamp a program in somebody's church, take over a program they've already given. You can't seem to get along anywhere that you go because you're always trying to invent something new or reinvent what the pastor already has in place, and then you leave when they don't let you do that. Your track record is what speaks volume for you. So it's important that when we may see someone, I don't know, before you call it a cult, Look at the track record of the leadership.
Yeah.
Look at the track record. Just because somebody is charismatic, they're building a following, people are loving their message. Jesus had a message that upset everybody. That doesn't make something necessarily a cult. And that's part of what we've got to look at. One of the other things that we've got to look at that a lot of people call cult is the belief system.
Yeah.
Because anytime there are beliefs that don't fit, then this is what people, well, I know what my Bible says. Well, I know my God would never tell somebody. No, he probably wouldn't tell you because he already knows how you're going to believe. So, like, one of the things that I know that people have an issue with, that even what we teach, is about the family doctrine. You know,
Yeah.
people think that we're anti-family, and people think, oh, you can't tell people not to talk to their relatives. First of all, there are toxic relatives, whether you saved or unsaved or somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Everybody has a toxic relative somewhere. If you go look on social media right now, there are trends of millennial adults telling their personal stories of why they've chosen to go no contact, why they're choosing not to show up to these funerals, they're choosing not to take care of these people in their old age. Go on social media and Google no contact with family or no contact with parent or narcissistic parent. And that these people are telling the stories themselves.
Yeah.
And most of these people don't necessarily serve God or publicly claim to have a relationship with God. So this is a known thing that we didn't just make up. It's a real issue, whether some of you choose to believe it or not.
Right.
It is a real issue. And there are a lot of people now in their late 20s, early 30s, and 40s and say, you know what? I am tired of toxic family members. I'm not going to no more baby showers, birthday parties, weddings,
Family
anniversaries, family reunions, and sit there and bite my tongue while y'all do toxic relative stuff, including biting the family, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want YouTube to flag it, to the thing, instead of calling no police and having them locked up in jail. You're trying to keep your eye on the children, but you keep bringing Uncle Billy Bob over, and we all know what Uncle Billy Bob has done to several people in the family.
Yeah.
So no, it's not cultish to tell you to stay away from them kind of relatives. In fact, Jesus Christ said himself when his own mama came looking for him, my family is who is my mother, my brother, and my family. These, the one that do the will of the Father. They are my family.
Jesus said it.
This is why I wrote the book, The Family Test. It is the first most important test that you see of disciples from Old Testament to New Testament, and it's the most commonly failed test in discipleship. Abraham had the family test. Joseph had the family test. Jesus called a couple people and okay, if you put your hand to the plow and you look back, you're not worthy. Let the dead bury the dead. It is a common thing throughout scripture, throughout the continuum of our faith. You're going to have to leave your family be to come be discipled. It's in the book. So there's a difference between leaving toxic family members alone or temporarily not having as much contact with your family while you go through a process and let God deal with you. Not saying you got to cut them off forever, but if you can't stop going to parties and reunions for 1 year, just 12 months.
And see, that's a secret to actually learning his voice accurately.
Come on.
Because if you want to learn his voice, sometimes the most important people in your life, sometimes he has to lessen their voice. Are you hearing what I'm saying? He has to lessen their voice to increase his voice. Because see, some of you will not obey the voice of God, until certain people's voice are demoted in your life. Some people and some voices have to be demoted in your life. Okay. And I'm sorry, there is a biblical pattern of discipleship from Old Testament to New Testament. Okay. And everybody had that, everybody that was discipled went through it. You and I are no different. I'm not saying never talk to your relatives again or cut them completely off.
Ain't nobody saying that.
Now, if they're toxic, you may need to cut them completely off.
Yeah, go back to them episodes that we got earlier on about when to cut off a toxic family member. It'll bless you.
But we have seen, and we teach the way that we do because of what we have seen over and over.
Relatives pull people clean out the will of God.
Out of the will of God.
Quick story. We had an individual one time that came from another state, wanting to be trained and discipled. I mean, they moved here, got a job, was functional, all of that. Did deliverance on this person. And when the spirit spoke through the person, the name was of a relative. And lo and behold, that relative was the very person that told them a bunch of lies to pull them out and for them to move back home and for that person to bring them to a financial ruin. I mean, it was a very
Yeah.
terrible situation.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is, and we'll talk more about discipleship later, because for those of y'all that are really looking for real discipleship, you're really going to have to get to a place. You're going to have to get in our mentorship group
Yeah.
sometime next year, because see, real discipleship, you got to cut out some of this other stuff. Some of y'all are so dysfunctional. This relative is raggedy, they sleeping with this person, that person, they addicted to all kinds of substances, they still live in the same projects, they
Be a
still working the
thief.
same job, they still haven't made anything of their lives. But you so dysfunctional, you can't leave these people alone for one calendar year. Leave these people alone for 1 year and work on yourself and see what happens. So for those of y'all that are for real, you're going to have to get with us in this mentorship next year. We're going to teach y'all some biblical stuff and some deep stuff, but you're going to be challenged in some areas to let these dysfunctional people alone for a little bit and see how God actually works in your life. The next thing that I want to talk about is systems of control. See, this is where there's a line between what is actual biblical order and what we consider a cult.
Come on.
I find that anything that people don't like, all of a sudden they call it control.
Control.
Having a system of accountability in place is not control. You don't like it. You go to work, there's a whole handbook this big that you haven't even read it all, but you have no problems following whatever they go along with. You sign everything they give you without even reading it. But then you go to the church, all of a sudden, well, let me see the doctrine. I don't know. I don't trust it. Huh? That's crazy. Having a system of accountability, having some kind of order or structure is not necessarily control. And I think that's important for people to understand. No, you can't just show up somewhere and do what you want to do. Yes, there's a process. When you first join any ministry, and you'll hear me talk about this again and again, the first thing you need to do is sit and process, become a good church member, get to know the people in the community, volunteer, become a part of some stuff. And sometimes you may not need to volunteer a whole lot yet. Just embrace the transition. Thank God for what you've been through. Pray and ask God where you're going. Just sit for about 6 months just to get comfortable. You don't need to rush into doing stuff. That's part of that dysfunction I was talking about. Some of y'all are so used to doing, you don't even know what you're a part of. Some of you, listen, you probably are in a Cultish ministry and don't know, because you're doing. And some of you're not doing enough.
They keep you busy for control
Yeah,
purposes.
because if you're too busy and you tired, you can't think and process for the light
That's
bulb
it.
to go up and say, "Hey, wait a minute,
That's it.
what?
That's
I
it.
done spent more hours here than I did in my job in the last 6 months." Come on now,
Mm-hmm.
we gotta think. So having a system of accountability, having systems of rotation in place, these things are for healthy purposes. They're for healthy purposes. It's not always about control. And yes, there should be some type of oversight even in departments, because again, these are people's lives. Somebody's got to be accountable. Some of these organizations where you have a lot of these SA situations where people are taken advantage of, it is because everything was too free and too loose, and there wasn't enough of a system of accountability or control, as some of you call it. And that's how some stuff fell through the cracks. Oh my God, we had no idea.
Right.
But then when there's a system in place to avoid these types of things, well, that's control. Some people can't make up their mind. They can't make up their
No, they
mind.
can't.
Can you just imagine if you went to the grocery store and nobody was in charge and there was no order or structure, the
Jesus
food
Christ.
was everywhere.
It'd be chaotic.
Exactly. But this is how some of y'all expect ministries to be because you so church hurt. That's crazy.
Yeah. The Lord taught me something
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, as people who know me know, I came out of a cultish ministry,
Mm-hmm.
and that thing had a deep imprint on my soul for a long time. It affected my leadership. I was scared to lead properly. a lot of times I was scared to make decisions and all this other stuff. It was just constant fear of being wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
you know, constant fear, and the Lord had to teach me something about authority. He said, "You don't need to be afraid of abuse of authority." Because first of all, there's a difference between the use of authority and the abuse of authority,
That's good.
right? Okay, like if I don't use the authority that I have been given, then our kids would run amok in this house. You know, if authority is not in place, there will be anarchy in the world. It wouldn't even be safe to sit on your front porch. It wouldn't be safe to live anywhere. Rules are what keep folk from breaking in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And then those who break the rules either end up going to jail or getting shot. So I'm just saying. So so anytime you see someone exercising a measure of rule,
Mm-hmm.
because the Bible does say leaders have rule, obey those that have what rule over you. But rule is not dictatorship.
That's right.
That's different. But we take any kind of authority or rule that we don't have, and we say that's cultish. And a leader has to establish a certain kind of rules for their ministry. And if you violate that, then you disrupt the order. When you disrupt the order, that stuff begins to have a ripple effect in the ministry.
Mm.
So that's why some leaders have to be strong in their leadership, and God trained some people like that. I was, God raised me to be a little bit stronger in my leadership. Now I'm balanced. I'm compassionate. I show a lot of grace, but there's things that I don't tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of y'all get mad when leaders don't tolerate certain things, and you keep trying to push that envelope. You know, if you don't like it, it's best to just leave in peace. Don't talk about the ministry or nothing. Just leave in peace. But everything that exudes authority is not cultish.
Right.
It's not oppressive or anything like that. Think about how you, if you have children, think about how you lead your home. Do you let your kids do what they want to do? I hope not. I hope not, because you'll be raising a spoiled brat if you do. You know, so you have to keep that in mind, and you
Yeah.
can't be so quick to label everything a certain thing because you don't like it or make you feel some type of way, or you know uh that reminds me. I remember one time on a prayer line, we had everybody on a line praying, and I got on there, people was lazy, people was sleeping. I
Mm-hmm.
started I rebuked everybody. It takes a lot for me to rebuke you. you know but I will, but I will get you. But you got to do something, and I'm talking, I gave a stern rebuke. You don't get on
You don't get on Jesus prayer line sleep.
no, people snoring and everything. I said, y'all lazy. Y'all lazy. And one brother, I mean, he talked to one of our leaders. He was like, man, listen, I don't like to beat up. Reminds me of my dad. I don't like to beat up. What? Because I said everybody was lazy? I didn't even call no names. So you must have been the one asleep. I don't know.
Mm-mm.
Snoring. That's disrespectful. And hey, people make mistakes, but hey, certain mistakes you get a rebuke for.
You
Just
can't
don't
be
do
on
it no
Jesus
more.
prayer line sleep. You
No.
can't be mad because you was asleep on Jesus prayer line.
If I'm the apostle and I come up here and I start praying, the next thing you know, I'm snoring. Guess what?
Y'all gonna be looking like, what?
Y'all be looking like what? And I'm gonna get an earful full from who? I'm gonna get an earful from her.
Don't do that.
You see what I'm saying? So listen, y'all. I noticed something.
Mm-hmm.
The last generation of leadership structure, um, they had a lot of cultist tendencies too,
They did.
but they had a lot of endurance. They had a lot of endurance. They was able to take more.
I'm concerned for a lot. That's a whole nother episode because I'm
Yeah,
concerned for a lot of the millennial leaders that are
yeah,
in charge today.
yeah,
I think with millennials, we are a 50-50. We're luck of the draw, pick of the basket. Half of us had that prior old school leadership that
Yeah.
helped them with the new edge and a new openness
Yeah.
to God's using and displaying of spiritual gifts that make us not only influential, that really has a position to position us as generals and as leaders of this generation. The other half of us was either raised by somebody that was church hurt or not raised at all, because we bucked against the system so much and we bucked against religion so much, we
Yeah.
wouldn't allow anybody to properly raise us and raise us up. And we then given titles to ourselves, and now we have a following and we're dangerous.
Mm.
It's a luck of the draw.
Yeah.
And but I want to make this last point. Another thing that they talk about, well, what makes a cult is how you have the previous members kind of showing people the ropes or showing them, how the culture is and what to expect. And there's a thin line, because biblically that's what you should expect in discipleship. Does not Titus 2 tell us about the older women teaching the younger women and the older
Yeah.
men teaching the younger men? See, that's a biblical principle, to have somebody that's naturally and spiritually older than you say, hey, let me show you the ropes. Let me show you how this thing is done. You gave your life to Christ 6 months ago, year two. That's great. I've been doing this thing for 10 or 15 years. Let me show you the ropes and how to navigate so you won't hit some of the pitfalls on your walking journey of faith of becoming more like Christ that I did. That's not cultish. It's when it's done with an ulterior motive to control you or to victimize you or to keep you overly vulnerable that it becomes a problem. But see, we read, oh my God, it's a cult. How? Titus tells us that. Titus 2 tells us that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can you be? See, you have a problem. I want to be myself, but then you go around, like I said, these family members, and you got the SA uncle there. I mean, do you want to be like him? Because you sitting around, you have no problem sitting around him. But when they be more like Christ, like means adjusting in a culture community where you become more like your fellow brothers and sisters, all of a sudden you're uncomfortable. That doesn't make any sense. So each and every one of these things that we pointed out today, you could see both the biblical point of view, and then you could also see where it can be cultish and kind of twisted. It takes discernment, and it takes a litmus test.
Yeah.
Look at the lives of the people that are present. You can look at some of the lives of the people that used to be there, but you can't always do that, because as that meme says, I don't know who the originator is, but there's a meme that I keep seeing on social media that said Judas had the best pastor, the best church, the
Yeah.
best mentor, and the best friend, and he still failed.
Yeah.
So sometimes the problem is the person, not necessarily who or what they have access to or had access to. Any closing remarks you got for this episode?
People say, um, I just want to be myself. But
The before Christ version of yourself, or the resurrected, created in the image and likeness of Christ's self?
because self is the first thing that's required for you to lay down when you begin to be discipled.
See,
Jesus said, if any man will come after
if
me,
I
he must
shouted, I'd be running right
deny
there.
himself, take up his cross, and follow me.
Mm.
So that when you come to God, or when you come to a ministry, or when you come into a discipleship relationship or whatever, there are things about you, and they don't even got to be sinful. It just could be things about you that God wants to change, and He used human vehicles to help facilitate that. So be it. That don't mean the ministry's cultish, because um, um, you know, you used to wearing dresses up to your mid thigh, and they said, "Hey, when you come up in here, wear them below your knees." That's just an example. I'm not religious about what people wear, but I don't think you should come to church with your skirt mid thigh. But the point is that Jesus said you got to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. So there's a whole lot more we can talk about this. One day I'm gonna give my personal
Yeah,
experience,
that's going to have to be a special circumstance.
my personal experience on this. I ain't call no names or nothing, but it's my testimony and my experience. So I ain't called no names, so can't nobody sue me. And then if you sue me, you got to prove what I'm rather what I'm saying
That's
is
worse. If they sue you and ain't nobody
yeah.
name mentioned, that means they admitting that they was the toxic problem.
Yeah, and they sue me. I got people ready waiting to testify against you. Don't play with me.
Lord have mercy. Well, listen, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Stop. We hope y'all enjoyed this episode of the F3 podcast. Listen, stay tuned for more great content. Be sure to click that link to find out how you can become an avid supporter of the podcast. And be sure to follow us over on IG as well. Until next time on the F3 podcast. Goodbye.